When I first pulled into the driveway of my new home, I felt like I'd finally made it. It was quiet, peaceful, a cozy little street lined with trees, neatly trimmed lawns, and houses that looked almost identical. The kind of place where people wave at each other just because they can. I remember sitting in my car for a minute longer, just smiling to myself. I had worked hard for this. Late nights, overtime, sacrifices, and now here I was, unlocking the front door of my first real home. The first thing I did before even unpacking half the boxes was plug in my new electric car, a shiny, silent machine that glided instead of roared. No gas stations, no oil changes, and no guilt about emissions. It was sleek, modern, and in my mind, the perfect fit for this clean, quiet neighborhood. I even had the charging station professionally installed right in my garage. Everything by the book. That first night, I slept like a rock. Until the next morning. I opened the door to grab my mail, and that's when I saw her. Standing at the end of her driveway, arms crossed, sunglasses on even though it was barely 8 a.m. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stared. I gave a small nod and mumbled a polite, "Morning," thinking maybe she was just squinting from the sun. Nope. Instead, she walked across the street like a soldier on a mission. No introduction, no, "Welcome to the neighborhood." Just this sharp, clipped voice. "You live here now?" I was caught off guard. Uh, yeah, just moved in 2 days ago." She nodded once, but it didn't feel friendly. It felt official, like she was mentally checking me off a list. "I'm Karen, HOA board member. I live over there." She pointed with her chin. "Just making sure you're aware of the community rules. We like to keep things tidy around here." I smiled, trying to keep it friendly. "Of course. I've read the guidelines. Everything's good." Her eyes narrowed. "You installed something in your garage?" I blinked. "My charger? For the car? That's not pre-approved." That was the first time I heard that phrase, not pre-approved. I'd come to hate it. I told her it was professionally installed, up to code, and that I'd read the HOA manual front to back. Nothing about EV chargers being restricted. I even mentioned that the model I used was on the city's recommended list. She didn't care. Her lips pursed. "I'll have to check with the board." Then she turned and walked away. That's how it started. No welcome pie, no handshake, just suspicion and attitude. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was just having a bad morning. Maybe she was one of those people who liked rules and order a little too much. But that wasn't it. That evening, I got my first HOA email. The subject line read, "Violation warning. Unapproved electrical installation." I laughed at first. I actually laughed. I thought maybe it was a mistake. I even called the HOA office to clarify. But no, the message had come directly from Karen. She'd submitted a complaint. Apparently, she claimed my EV charger was visually distracting and could be a potential fire hazard, which made no sense since it was inside my garage. Still, I sent over the permit, the installation documents, the specs. I was polite, respectful, figured it would blow over, but it didn't. The next day, I found a note on my front door, a printed letter, taped up like some kind of passive-aggressive statement piece. It said I had 72 hours to remove all unauthorized equipment or face daily fines. Signed, of course, by Karen. I didn't even know an HOA could be this strict, especially about something that wasn't even visible from the street. But Karen had made up her mind, and nothing I said seemed to matter. And it wasn't just emails and notes. She started showing up, walking slowly past my driveway, stopping just long enough to glare at the car, then scribble something into a little notepad. I saw her once pretending to take a phone call as she stood right in front of my mailbox. One night I came home a little late, and the second I opened my garage door, I saw her across the street, lights off, standing in her front window, staring out like a movie villain. It was creepy, I'm not gonna lie. Still, I tried to stay calm. I didn't want drama. I liked this neighborhood. I liked the quiet. But Karen, she wasn't letting it go. The next HOA meeting was online, through a Zoom call. I joined because I wanted to understand what the issue really was. Maybe there was something I was missing. But as soon as the meeting started, Karen took the floor. She launched into a rant, Something about how electric cars attract a different kind of crowd, how chargers might leak electrical fumes. I swear she said that. And how we had to protect property values. I sat there in disbelief. Other board members looked confused, even uncomfortable, but no one stopped her. No one corrected her. And when I tried to speak, she muted me. I kid you not, she muted me on the HOA Zoom call. That's when I realized this wasn't just about a charger. This was personal. I don't know what her problem was. Maybe she hated change. Maybe she just needed something to control. Or maybe she just didn't like me. I wasn't loud. I didn't throw parties. I mowed my lawn. I waved to neighbors. But none of that seemed to matter. The next morning, I got another fine. Then another the next day. Every time I charged my car, even inside the garage, she claimed it was a safety issue. I was being fined $50 per incident. I appealed, sent emails, called. Nothing worked. At one point, I saw her walking with a neighbor I hadn't met yet. She was pointing at my house and whispering like she was sharing some neighborhood gossip. That neighbor hasn't spoken to me since. It was starting to feel like a movie. One of those small-town dramas where one person ruins everything for everyone else. Except this was real. My real house, my real money, and my real electric car, which I had to charge to get to work. I started thinking maybe I should just move. Maybe it wasn't worth the stress, but something in me just couldn't give her that satisfaction. She wanted me to bend, to unplug, to back down. But the more she pushed, the more I wanted to push back. And that's when I had an idea. Not to fight her, not to argue, just to follow the rules, exactly as they were written. Because if Karen wanted to play by the book, then so would I. And if she didn't like it, well, that wasn't really my problem anymore. So here's where things started to spiral. After getting that fourth fine for just charging my car in my own garage, I snapped. Not in a dramatic, throw things around kind of way. No, it was quieter than that. It was the kind of frustration where you just sit there, staring at your screen, jaw clenched, wondering how the hell this became your life. I started going over the HOA rules again, line by line. I wasn't looking to cause trouble. I just needed to understand how someone could be so obsessed with something that wasn't even hurting anyone. The rules were boring. Long, half of them were probably written before electric cars were even a thing. But I read them all. Twice. Nothing. There was absolutely nothing in there that banned EV chargers. Nothing that said I couldn't charge my car at home. The only slightly relevant line talked about permanent electrical installations on external property. But my charger, it was inside my garage, hidden, safe, professionally wired. I even had the receipts. I printed everything out, every single page. I made notes, I highlighted parts. I was ready to bring logic into a war that clearly wasn't based on any. But logic doesn't work on someone like Karen. The next morning, I emailed the HOA board directly. Not Karen, the board. I attached all the documents, explained everything in the calmest, most adult-sounding way possible. I wasn't emotional. I wasn't rude, just facts. 2 days later, I got a response. Not from the board, from Karen. She replied to my email using her board title, stating, and I quote, "While the rule book does not explicitly mention electric vehicle chargers, the spirit of the HOA guidelines is to maintain aesthetic and structural harmony." Aesthetic and structural harmony. I laughed when I read that. Out loud. Alone in my kitchen. The charger was in my garage. Was she imagining it glowed neon and played dubstep? I replied, kindly pointing out that her interpretation of aesthetic harmony didn't apply, since no one could even see the charger. No reply. But the fines kept coming. Then one night, I pulled into my driveway after work and saw a small crowd at the end of the street. Karen was standing in the middle, talking to 3 other neighbors. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I saw the way they looked at me when I stepped out of my car. 2 of them didn't even make eye contact. I wasn't paranoid. I knew what she was doing. That week, 2 more neighbors filed complaints. One said my charging setup was creating a buzzing sound that was disturbing the peace. Another claimed it was drawing more electricity and could cause transformer damage. These weren't real concerns. They were buzzwords. Random things Karen had probably Googled just to make it sound dangerous. The thing is, my car charged silently. No buzzing, no humming, no flickering lights. Just a small green glow that disappeared once the battery was full. Still, the HOA sent another notice. This one felt different. It had an official stamp. A warning that if I didn't cease all unauthorized use of electrical devices for vehicle charging, I could face legal action. Legal action. That's when I realized she was trying to scare me, to break me. She wanted to win. I remember pacing the living room that night, back and forth, over and over, trying to decide what to do. Should I call a lawyer? Would it even help? Should I go to the media? Was this the kind of story anyone would care about? Man fined for charging car in garage. It didn't exactly scream headline, but then I saw something that changed everything. One of the HOA rule documents had a small footnote at the bottom of page 12. I had missed it before. It mentioned that if a homeowner could not charge their vehicle on private property due to active HOA investigation, they were permitted to use alternative temporary charging setups so long as they were not obstructing public access. Wait, what? I read it again and again. Basically, it meant that if your garage or driveway was under some kind of dispute, you were technically allowed to charge your vehicle on private land temporarily, so long as it didn't block traffic or sidewalks. That's when the idea hit me. Karen had been so eager to control everything, so determined to prove I was breaking the rules. But what if I just followed the rules better than she did? Her front yard, oddly enough, was partially sloped and overlapped the public curb a little. I'd seen it before. When the city did curb work last spring, they left a painted line that cut right through her grass. Technically, the part closest to the sidewalk was public easement, but the space just beyond that, it was her property, and just wide enough for a car. It was petty. I knew that. But after everything, it felt like poetic justice. So the next morning, I rolled my extension cord across the sidewalk, parked my car barely on her lawn, just the front tires, and plugged it in. I stood there for a second, hands in my pockets, looking at the charging icon blink on the dash. It worked. I went back inside, made coffee, waited. Didn't take long. About 10 minutes later, I heard a car door slam, then yelling. I looked out the window and saw her storming across the grass like it was a battlefield. She wasn't just mad, she was furious, screaming something about trespassing, about calling the cops, about me violating the sacred trust of the HOA. I stepped outside calmly, coffee in hand, and said, "You told me I couldn't charge it on my property, so I'm charging it somewhere else." She pointed at the ground. "That's my lawn." I shrugged. "You're right. According to the HOA rulebook, Section 8, Paragraph C, temporary charging is allowed if it's not on public property. And you said my garage is under investigation, right?" Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. She called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later. 2 officers. One of them looked like he was trying not to laugh when she explained what was happening. They asked me to explain. I showed them the rule book, the HOA emails, the fines, the complaints, the loophole. I had it all ready in a folder. One officer looked at Karen and said, "Ma'am, this seems like an HOA issue. There's no crime being committed here." She screamed that it was harassment, that I was doing this to taunt her. I didn't say anything. I just unplugged the charger and rolled the cord up slowly, calmly, like I had all the time in the world. That night I got another email, not from Karen, from the actual HOA board president. He apologized, said the situation had gotten out of hand, that they would suspend all fines until a full review could be done, and that Karen had been advised to recuse herself from EV-related matters due to a conflict of interest. Conflict of interest. It was the nicest way anyone had ever said, "She went too far." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Because in that moment, something shifted. People started talking to me again. Neighbors I hadn't seen in weeks suddenly waved when I drove by. One guy down the street even asked where I got my charger installed. Said he'd been thinking about getting an EV too. Karen? She didn't come out much after that, at least not when I was around. Her window curtains stayed closed. Her driveway was always empty. I didn't charge on her lawn again. I didn't need to. But I kept that extension cord. just in case. Days passed, then weeks. Things started to feel normal again. No more tickets taped to my door. No angry emails in bold red letters. The board went silent. Karen? She vanished from the front lawn watch patrol. The street felt lighter, like someone had turned off a pressure valve. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. But I should have known better. You can't humiliate someone like Karen and expect her to just walk away. At first, it was little things. My trash bins would be rolled back out to the curb in the middle of the day. I'd wake up to find one of them tipped over, contents neatly spread across my driveway. Not messy, just intentional, like someone wanted it to be noticed, not cleaned. Then came the packages. 3 deliveries in 1 week, each addressed to my house, none of which I ordered. One box had 40 pounds of cat litter. I don't own a cat. Another was full of as-seen-on-TV gadgets. Egg separators, banana slicers, some weird toe stretcher thing. It was like someone was trying to gaslight me with a twisted version of home shopping roulette. I checked the return addresses. All fake. Still, I brushed it off. Maybe just some random prank. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Karen wasn't involved. But then came the garden. My front yard was simple. 2 small bushes, a strip of grass, and a few potted plants on the porch. Easy to manage. Peaceful. One morning I walked out to find my plants had been replaced. Seriously, replaced. Same pots. But inside? Plastic flowers. Bright pink. Dusty. Cheap. Someone had taken my actual plants, the ones I watered every day, and swapped them for dollar store fakes. I stood there staring at them, wondering if I was losing my mind. Who does that? Who goes onto someone's porch, digs out their real plants, and replaces them like it's some kind of twisted neighborhood art project? I installed a camera the next day. Not super obvious, but just enough to catch movement on the porch. Motion activated. Quiet. Sleek. And that night at exactly 2:17 a.m., it caught her. Karen, wearing a hoodie, hood up, gloves on, carrying a small shovel and a tote bag like she was going to a gardening heist. She walked right up, checked around like she was in a spy movie, and then started digging. Right there, on my porch. The next morning I sat with my coffee, staring at the footage on my phone. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. I felt stunned. Like, what level of obsession do you have to reach to sneak onto someone's porch at 2 a.m. just to mess with their plants? I thought about posting the video, maybe on the neighborhood app, maybe even online. But something held me back. Part of me didn't want to feed the drama. The other part, I was curious how far she'd go. So I waited. 2 days later, I came home to find a folded flyer under my doormat. It wasn't an ad or a coupon. It was a single sheet of paper, typed in 12-point Times New Roman. No greeting, no name. It said, "The neighborhood isn't what it used to be. Some people bring different values, different energy. Not all of us want change. Not all of us welcome it." I stared at the page, no signature, no clue who dropped it off. But I knew. The meaning was clear. It wasn't about my car, or the charger, or even the plants. It was about me. Karen didn't want people like me in her little corner of the world. Quiet didn't mean peaceful to her. It meant control. And I'd messed with that. But here's the thing about me. Once I know someone's trying to break me, it stops being about comfort. It becomes about principle. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide. That weekend I hosted a cookout. Simple, just burgers, hot dogs, some music, nothing wild. I knocked on doors, handed out invites, smiled like I had no idea what kind of storm had been brewing beneath the surface. To my surprise, people came. Families from 3 houses down, the couple across the street, even the quiet guy who always wore headphones and walked his dog at 6 a.m. sharp. They brought drinks, side dishes, laughter, and they stayed. For the first time since I moved in, the street felt like a neighborhood. And Karen? She stood on her porch the entire time, arms crossed, watching. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That night, after everyone had left and the sun had dipped below the trees, I walked to the edge of her lawn. just close enough for her to hear me if she happened to be listening. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just said, loud enough to carry across the grass, "You don't scare me." Then I went back inside. And for a few weeks, things really did calm down. Until the city inspector showed up. Clipboards, measuring tools, hard hats. They knocked on my door early one morning, flashing ID and asking to inspect a potentially unapproved electrical addition. I blinked. "You mean the charger?" They nodded. Apparently, someone had submitted an anonymous report, claimed the installation was done without permits, and posed a fire hazard. The inspector was polite, professional. I let him in, showed him the paperwork, the permits, even the electrician's name and license number. He left with a smile and told me everything checked out. But that wasn't the point. Karen had gone beyond the HOA now. She was trying to get the city involved. I started documenting everything, every fine, every complaint, every incident. I kept the footage, the emails, even the flyer. I wasn't just living in this house anymore. I was building a case. That's when a neighbor, an older woman who lived 2 houses down, came by with a plate of cookies. She looked nervous, like she was about to confess something. She told me Karen had been rallying neighbors, telling them I was aggressive, that I was bringing politics into the neighborhood, that my car, yes, my car, was too modern and might attract the wrong crowd. She'd even passed around fake documents. One of them claimed I'd been cited for illegal dumping in another state. I had never even been to that state. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some random neighborhood spat. It was character assassination. And Karen? She wasn't just a nosy neighbor. She was a full-blown manipulator with an obsession for control and a dangerous willingness to bend the truth. So I did what any rational person would do. I hired a lawyer, not to sue, not yet, just for advice. I laid out everything, documents, footage, messages. He looked through it all quietly, flipping pages, nodding. After about 30 minutes, he leaned back in his chair and said, "You've got a harassment case, possibly defamation." I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. Tired of defending myself for living a normal life. Tired of walking on eggshells in my own front yard. Tired of wondering what ridiculous thing would happen next. But something else happened that week. 3 other neighbors approached me separately. Each of them said the same thing, more or less. "She did this to the family before you, too. They left after 5 months. She hates anything new. She once tried to get someone evicted for putting a basketball hoop in the driveway." Suddenly, I wasn't just the guy with the electric car. I was part of a pattern, and that meant I wasn't alone anymore. The more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. This woman, Karen, she'd made it her mission to run the neighborhood like a kingdom. And anyone who didn't bow, she made their life hell, quietly, strategically, like a game of chess only she knew she was playing. But the thing about people like Karen, they don't expect pushback. And this time she picked the wrong neighbor. I started talking to more residents. Casually at first, quick chats at the mailbox, a conversation while walking the dog. I didn't bring up the charger or the fines. I just asked one question: has Karen ever bothered you? And what I got was an avalanche. One woman said Karen once measured the height of her grass with a ruler and reported her for visual pollution. Another guy said Karen tried to block his daughter from starting a lemonade stand, said it violated commercial zoning standards. A man on the corner? Karen told the board his patio lights were too festive and invited crime. She wasn't protecting the community. She was controlling it. And for the first time, people were finally ready to say it out loud. We held a meeting, not official, not on the books, just neighbors gathered in someone's backyard with folding chairs and bug spray. Someone brought snacks, someone else brought a speaker. We talked about Karen, about her pattern of harassment, her lies, her manipulation of the HOA to settle personal grudges. We shared screenshots, stories, emails. One couple even revealed that Karen had forged their name on a complaint years ago. Everyone was quiet after that. Then one neighbor stood up, her name was Lisa, and said, "Why are we letting her do this? Why are we scared of one person?" Silence again, then nods, slow, reluctant, but real. That night something shifted. We weren't just neighbors anymore. We were done being her targets. The next day, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board, not just against the fines, but against Karen herself. I attached everything: the footage, the flyers, the emails, the testimonies. I CC'd the HOA president, the vice president, and the city council liaison. It was a risk, a big one, but I didn't care anymore. An hour after I hit send, my phone rang. It was Karen. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. 2 days later, an HOA meeting was called. Official this time. Formal agenda. Location. The community center. I walked in expecting drama. What I got was theater. Karen sat at the head of the table like a queen ready to defend her throne. The room was packed. Neighbors I'd never even seen before, all crammed in, standing in the back, arms crossed. The board president stood and read through the agenda. First item, complaint against board member Karen. Karen's face didn't flinch. They opened the floor for discussion. I was the first to speak. I didn't yell. I didn't rant. I just told the truth. What happened with the charger? The fines, the packages, the porch flowers, the city inspector, the lies. Then I sat down. One by one, others stood up. Lisa, the guy with the dog, the woman with the lemonade stand story, even the quiet couple from the corner who never opened their blinds. Each person with their own Karen moment. Each one just a little more damning. Karen tried to talk. She really did. But every time she opened her mouth, someone else spoke up. She said we were all exaggerating, that we were misinterpreting her community protection efforts, that it was mob mentality, but no one was listening. The board called a vote. They didn't even ask her to leave the room. The final tally, 6-1. Karen was removed from the board. Her face turned pale. She got up, gathered her folder, and walked out of that room like it was the longest hallway she'd ever walked in her life. She didn't look back. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. But everyone felt it. The silence after the door shut was heavy. It wasn't joy. It was relief. After that, everything changed. The HOA removed the fines, reimbursed me for the ones I'd paid. They updated the rulebook to include a clear clause about EV chargers being permitted on a private property with proof of proper installation. A week later, I saw 3 houses install chargers. 2 Teslas, 1 Rivian. Karen still lived there. Same house. But something was different now. Her blinds stayed shut. Her lawn, once perfectly trimmed, grew wild in patches. The edge along the sidewalk got ragged. The flowers in her front bed died. No more measuring grass with a ruler. No more HOA emails. No more passive-aggressive flyers. Just silence. One afternoon, I saw her standing in the window. Just for a second. She was watching. I didn't wave. Neither did she. Life moved on. The neighborhood started to feel like a neighborhood again. People waved. Kids played. Someone even painted a mural on the utility box by the mailboxes. Bright colors, big letters. It said, "Be kind." I laughed when I saw it. I don't know who painted it, but I like to think the neighborhood finally found its voice. Not loud, not angry, just enough. And as for me, I still charge my car in my garage. Every night, quietly, like it was always meant to be. No noise, no drama, just the soft hum of change.